This is part three of family poems and stories of our lives. The Okefenokee Swamp near Waycross is the largest blackwater wetland ecosystem in North America. It was made into a state park in Georgia. During the Great Economic Depression of 1930 onward, my dad worked in building that park. He was just digging out the canals and building wooden walkways and a watchtower. They worked to stay alive back then. The hard depression happened before I was born. He did brutal work among gators, rattlesnakes, and moccasins. I cannot imagine me doing something like that. Now it's just all a sad memory. He was my father. Before I was born, he was doing that. And once a week, a truck would also take workers, him included, to Brunswick, Georgia, where Jekyll and St. Simon Islands and the Brunswick shipyards, where they built ships. And on the weekends, he'd go home to see mom and older siblings, if they could go home on weekends. That was in the 30s and the early 40s. All these things I was told before I was born, no one else knows them anymore because I'm the last one of my family. That's heavy. And it's sad. These words I just read to you, I copied to a new memo so I could let my daughter and my grandson know. They'll need to visit these places someday. And Bickley too, where all of us lived, except my oldest sister Doris. She had already married by that time, but she would come and visit us every now and then in Bickley. My brain feels like a download now, like what it means, like, will I die soon? You know, like a sign or something. My side of these in my head have reminded me there's no one else to tell them because I'm the oldest. We lived in Bickley, and we lived there for 12 years. From the time I was in the first grade till I graduated high school at Ware County High School. So I went to Bickley from age 6 through the 7th grade, age 12. Then we had a new school that was an elementary school called Pinecrest Elementary. I went there for 1 year because we were the 8th grade class of that school. Then I went on to Ware County High School from 60 to 64. So we lived in Bickley, and we lived there for 12 years. Daddy lived there for 3 years. So from 52 to 55, he lived there. He passed away August 31st of that year. Howard and David moved away in 1955 and 1957. Howard married first in North Georgia, where I live now, around Dallas. And then David came up and met a friend of hers, Howard's first wife, and he married, so he's been up here since at least 57. Clarice got married in Bickley in 1959, so she moved away from Bickley. Shirley, my youngest sister, she got married in 1960, and she moved away. My older brother, Wesley, who was 5 years older than me, not the oldest brother, but older than me, he went into the service in 62 or 63. And he visited us a couple times in Bickley before we moved away, but he never lived in Bickley again. But Mom and me and Revis, we were there for all 12 years. And like I've said to other people in other pieces of writings of mine, it was like being in heaven. A place of love and grace and mercy and forgiveness. Now the story I'm about to tell you is true, and it may shock you because of the time. But in 1975, when I began my career with the Department of Family and Children Services in Fulton County, Georgia, Atlanta, in other words, come 1976, I was promoted to a supervisor because I had some previous experience with the Ware County Department of Family and Children Services. So my promotion to supervisor located me to a new office, and my supervisor there was showing me around, introducing me to other mostly black women, white women, and some black men. But there were very few white men that were employed in Fulton County DFACs, and even fewer supervisors. But I was promoted, and uh, I was being shown around to some of the other people and supervisors there. So I was introduced to a black elderly woman. When she heard my name, she asked the second time, "What was your last name, Travis?" I said, "Sweat." "And you are from Ware County?" I said. "Who's your father?" "Purdom," I said. A few days later, she and I spoke more of where I was from. We got together a few days later just talking. Her name was Pauline Hill. Hill was her maiden name, not the married name she was when I met her, so I'll leave that unmentioned. But when we were talking, Pauline Hill, a black woman, in 1976, told me that now this was in the 1920s because my father didn't marry my mom till I think he was born in 1909 and he was 19 when they got married. So when in 1928 is when they married. So even before then, she said if things had not been segregated when your dad and I were young, I could have been your mother. And what she meant and what she was implying by that was that they may have loved each other at one time. And that would have had to have been in the 1920s. So I'll tell you how that made me feel. It made me feel like I was born into a family where there was no prejudice against a person because of their color. That made me happy.